G'day, and welcome to the complete Barry's Guide to Low Budget Film.
I'm Crob Edmonds and he's Dave Bishop.
Am I? Really? It's been so long. Dave Bishop.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Deal with it, dude.
Dude, I'm dealing, but that's hard. Dave Bishop. Damn it.
Yep. Welcome to episode 8, which is Tools of the Trade, part 1.
Yeah, we've shown you a bunch of theory on writing and producing, but now it's time to actually get our hands dirty and get into the real nitty-gritty of filmmaking.
So we'll start off with that most important piece of equipment, the camera. Films actually get their name from the celluloid photographic stock that traditional films are shot on.
That's right. A traditional film is made by running film stock, usually 35mm, through a camera at the rate of 24 frames per second, giving an exposure time comparable to that of a standard photographic stills camera.
The exposed negative then has to be processed in much the same way as a traditional photograph.
Which costs money.
And then the film has to be graded, which means adjusting the colour and the exposure so that all the shots have a consistent look.
Which costs more money.
And in the old days, an editor would actually physically cut and splice the film to create the cut. But that was then, and this is now.
Yes, it's now the 21st century, and I, for one, am massively proud to be a 21st century digital boy.
I don't know how to live, but I got a lot of toys.
Okay, well, I for one personally still believe that film is the absolute best way to physically capture an image. It's also the most flexible way to capture the image, but I will admit, it costs an arm and a leg. And a foot.
Yeah, and like an ear, and some scalp, and maybe an eye, which would make it quite hard to use the camera.
Yes, but expensive is one thing digital is not. The current prosumer standard of HDV records quite happily onto mini DV tapes, though hard drive and optical recording devices are fast becoming standard.
So, what is digital?
Good question, Dave. Let's start with what it's not and look at analog recording.
Yes, an analog sampling process takes a waveform that represents something like a singer's voice or a guitar track, and it samples that waveform as accurately as it possibly can and transcribes it directly to a recording medium like, say, a old-fashioned magnetic cassette tape.
And when you play that tape back in your cassette Walkman... Dave, what's a cassette Walkman?
Ah, youth.
Anyway, when you play it back in your cassette Walkman, it converts the magnetically recorded waveform back into an audible sound as accurately as it can.
As accurately as it can, and that's the thing about analog recording. Analog recording is subject to interference, white noise, and generational loss, which means that if you record from a master tape to another tape, and then from that tape to another tape, and so on, eventually you'll end up with no original recording and all white noise.
Digital, on the other hand, takes a look at that waveform that represents the singer's voice or the guitar track and samples it at regular discrete intervals, which it then records by numeric value.
Yes, and that value is then translated into binary, which means it's translated into representation of only zeros and ones. And then those zeros and ones are transmitted to give the representation of the waveform, which is reassembled at the other end, which is why you always get either a perfect picture or nothing on digital television. Because instead of sending a waveform that is subject to static, it sends a waveform whereby a 0 always looks like a 0 and a 1 always looks like a 1. And as the interference increases, they still look like zeros and ones, right up to the point where a 1 could be a 0 or a 0 could be a 1, and then you lose everything.
But back to the camera. Whether you're shooting on film or digital, you're going to capture the image through a lens.
Yes, and lenses come in two main families. Zoom lenses zoom,
Duh.
and prime lenses are designed for one specific focal length. So for example, you could have a long lens for a long shot, or a wide lens for a wider, more close-up shot, but once you've attached a prime lens, you can't change the framing of the shot without actually pushing the camera in or pulling it out. It's been so long.
Choosing your shot is one of the great arts of cinematography and directing, but basically you've got these ones to choose from. The extreme close-up, the medium close-up, or close-up, the medium shot,
The two-shot.
the long or wide shot,
And then you have some fruity artistic shots like
the over-the-shoulder shot and the POV shot.
the high-angle shot and the low-angle shot.
But one good shot does not a film make. You've got to mix and match them up, you've got to start with some wides and go into some closes, and basically, Make up the recipe as you go along, but do mix and match.
Yeah, it's all part of the visual storytelling. It's like a cookbook. These are just your ingredients to work with, from which you can make something tasty. Or it's like a liquor cabinet. These are the spirits from which you can make some rocket fuel. Speaking of which, I'm thirsty.
Me too.
See you next week.
As we were heading out to shoot today's episode, the location we were going to was covered in this wonderful fog. It's like something out of a Stephen King film. It just sort of rolled in while we were there, making shooting Barry's stuff completely unfeasible. But it did give us a nice background for some of the early shots, and it just looked fantastic. So we got some footage. You should always be thinking about getting stock footage, because you can upload it to various sites on the web and even make some money out of it. But it's always useful just to have something out of the ordinary sitting on your shelf on hand, like this.